Good afternoon, everybody. Can I get a show of hands as to who has heard of Equinix before?
Where's what?
Who has heard of Equinix before? Dan, thank you. Anybody else? Okay. So most of you guys probably have not heard of Equinix. So I will go through a set of presentations here in terms of who is Equinix, what are we trying to do, and how can we actually help the industry move further along the NFV journey. So when Equinix first of all ventured into this particular space, we look at 4 different elements as to how the industry is actually evolving. People are going towards the digital business. They're looking for globalization. Security is obviously top of mind. And then finally, you need a whole ecosystem. I think you heard before from the previous speaker that everything is pretty complex. There's a lot of element that goes actually into it. So the importance here is to actually have that complete ecosystem. And what we'd like to do is actually take advantage of that in terms of where Equinix is positioned today. So we want to try and reduce some of the complexities, lower the latencies, lower the risks, as well as lower the integration. So that's really the main purpose of the NFV as a service that Equinix is actually offering. So this is the portfolio of what Equinix actually has. Oh, okay. So this is the portfolio that Equinix actually has. At the very core layer here, at the bottom layer, this is the primary services that we provide. Most of the people that knows Equinix knows us by our co-location service. However, the most important thing that brings us value is actually this whole space, the interconnection solutions that we actually offer. So we got various different solutions that we actually help the industry actually flourish. What we're about is actually helping that integration to come together easily and in the quickest manner possible. So let me just go through very quickly. Equinix has around about 204 data centers today around the world, across 24 countries in 54 metropolitan cities. That's our footprint today. So we have Metro Connect, which helps you connect between the metropolitan cities, between the data centers that we have. Equinix Connect is our internet connection service. Cross Connect is the typical usage in terms of helping 2 different companies to actually do connections with each other. And Internet Exchange is typically used by a lot of the carriers for peering with one another. And then finally, what we did was we have this Cloud Exchange Fabric that we've actually interconnected a layer 2 across our data centers. So among the 54 metros that we have, 37 of that is actually available using the Cloud Exchange Fabric. And finally, the last product that we introduced back in June of this year, so this is pretty new, is what we call Network Edge. And that is NFV as a service, branded. Okay, so you could get a Cisco CSR1KV, for example, on a bring your own license as well as pay as you go. You could get a Juniper VSRX, both acting as a firewall as well as a router. You could get a Palo Alto VM series firewall. You could get a Fortinet firewall. Okay, all of those are actually available. And on top of it, very recently we actually enabled the CloudGenix and Versa SDOne Edge Gateway. All of those are actually available within the Equinix footprint, and I'll show you where we are actually have that made possible. So I just want to go through, this is probably the major portion of our offering. We have a set of digital customer experience, so all of these are actually available through a portal, through an API. We have a developer platform, and I'll show you at the back of this presentation, there's a set of links that you could actually connect to learn much more about it. So the intent of what we're trying to do is basically trying to get everything that people used to do on a physical appliance and virtualize it. Taking the elements of as a service that we have accustomed to from the cloud world and making it possible. So NFV as a service is truly made available on a zero startup cost. So you don't need to invest in your own hardware anymore, okay? It's self-service. It is pay-as-you-go. So the model of you using it on a consumption model, we have it available on a daily, monthly, or a yearly rate, okay? And it's fixed charge. Once you've actually set it up, there's no additional variable charges on top of it. We've also provided integrated monitoring. And in the cloud world, it goes for per minute billing. We've made it into a daily billing as the lowest common denominator. So this is the elements of as a service for NFV that we have actually made available here. All right, these are the vendors. I mentioned that before. I'm going to skip over in the interest of time. So the position of Equinix is we have around about 1,700 telcos that lives in our data center today. Okay, there's about 50% of the Fortune 500 companies also live in our data centers, and the hyperscalers. So everybody knows about Amazon, Google, Microsoft. They use Equinix, okay? And it ranges from about high 20% up to about 60-some% of the infrastructure actually lives in the Equinix data centers. So we're able to actually take advantage of it so we can connect them directly to our fabric. A lot of them have actually integrated their solution. So in the case of Verizon, for example, they've actually made their SDI capabilities. So anything that you can get from Verizon of your MPLS connection, as long as you have MPLS service, for example, from Verizon, you could connect it to our ECX fabric, and you could actually take advantage of that immediately, okay, through the network edge connections. So all of this is available today. These are the set of marketplace that we actually have. So the experience that you get is you come in through a portal, you would actually choose the metro that you want to come in at, you choose the device, and then we would actually deploy it. We will ask you for the connections that you want to connect with, and we'll spin it up in a virtual sense with no upfront CapEx costs, okay? And therefore, it lowers the barrier to entry in terms of introducing SDN and NFV. All right, so this next slide here is showing the fact that if you do want to actually build your own appliance, you could actually still do that. So we have this physical, what we call performance hub, where you could actually buy the co-location service, put your application in. For performance reason, you may actually choose that solution. However, because of the network edge, we can actually instantiate these in minutes, okay, to complement that. So the way that we would like to see this actually work is that once you've reached a certain scale, this is actually perfect for greenfield deployment. So if you want to try out a brand new service, and you don't know what success may actually look like, and you don't want to necessarily invest in that capital, you probably should start off with the network edge solution. However, once you've reached this critical mass, you probably want to go to a performance hub implementation and actually deploy it directly. Okay? So to me, that's the best of both worlds that you actually get through Equinix. So these are the functionalities that we've introduced. So we've introduced router as a service, firewall as a service, this SDOne edge gateway as a service. So these are all available. And these are the key critical features that we've actually enabled. So it's high in security, it's low latency, not ultra low latency, but it's low latency as it is. It's lowering the costs with an OpEx model, deployed in minutes. Okay, you can actually get this in minutes, literally. It's self-service, so we do the day zero provisioning of that VNF, and then day 1 and 2 goes back to you to actually configure it. So this is your own dedicated NFV that you could actually configure yourself. And then at the end of the day, it's a brand. It's not Equinix. This is not an Equinix VNF. This is a branded VNF. You get it from Cisco, you get it from Juniper, you get it from Palo Alto, you get it from Fortinet, Versa, and CloudGenix. That's what we have today. We have a slew of other vendors that are also coming along. So this is where we are today. This is all the instances that I mentioned before that's actually available. And these are some of the use cases. So you'd be surprised as to how people actually have come. So we have enabled this back in June. We have more than a dozen customers today that are actually using this. This is one of the majority of the use cases where the workload actually sits in the cloud, and they want to just have dedicated links between Oracle Cloud and AWS, right? Instead of going through the internet, which you can actually do today, they want to have a reliable, consistent service. So they've actually spun up an actual router and actually connected the two clouds together. This is another use case that we also have. So some people may have their own cage that sits within Equinix, that, for example, resides in Stockholm. However, the cloud connectivity actually is in Amsterdam. So now you could actually connect back and get that local instance of that private connectivity of the cloud. All right, so next one. This is a firewall. So some people may not necessarily trust the cloud directly. So they want to have extra protection in their own firewall. So this is another use case. And then finally, if you look at this one, this is a big one. So this is an SDOne use case, where because of the position that Equinix is in, we have internet service providers as well as network service providers that resides within Equinix. We could actually bring a lot of these accessibility. So it effectively gives you control of the last mile. What Equinix does well is we do the middle mile extremely well. So this is, with SD-WAN, it gives you that last mile control. So this is an actual instance of a customer that is down in Melbourne. They've actually deployed this solution. So they've connected their LA sites that is sitting in Oracle Cloud, and they want to connect to a Silicon Valley instance in Amazon. So they use the network edge here to actually spin it up. These two are the actual ECX fabric that I mentioned before. All right, this is a multi-cloud orchestration. We have quite a few cloud providers that are already connected on ECX fabric. So in this particular case, they were able to get access to NetApp for storage. They're able to get to Amazon through their service key, and also IBM Cloud through the service key. So they're able to actually have this multi-cloud orchestration enabled through this network edge. All right, so here are the sites that's available today. So we're in Silicon Valley, Ashburn, Amsterdam, London, Singapore, Sydney, Frankfurt, Chicago, and Dallas. So what I mentioned before, with all of those network devices that's available, you could actually get these at these locations directly in minutes now. This is fully available, enabled today. We've also got Sao Paulo, Seattle, and these are the rest of the other sites that's also coming in 2020. And here probably the main key differentiation. So if you were to look at why wouldn't I actually stand up a VNF instance, say, on a public cloud? That often becomes a question that comes up quite regularly. So what I would say is that if your workload is always on one cloud, you should just deploy your VNF in that cloud. However, if your workload requires multi-cloud or it requires hybrid cloud, you want to consider network edge. All right, so here is an example of, if you want to have a pre-tuned VNF as a service, which we have done, and spin it up in minutes, you come to us. That allows you to connect to 150 plus cloud providers, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, right, directly, immediately here. It's a fixed price, as I mentioned before, which often becomes a key critical element when you're considering where you want to do your deployment. Because if you go to the cloud, most often, you actually get charged for egress costs. In our case, there is no egress costs. And egress could be quite expensive once you add up the workload. And then finally, we actually provide support. So no longer will you be on your own in terms of trying to set this up. So if you have issues in terms of configuring the actual VNF, we will actually support you. So we will take level 1 support. We will work with the vendor to provide level 2 and 3 support. So how do you buy it? So here's really the two elements. So you buy what we call the network edge instance. And then you buy the license associated to it, both on a bring your own license or pay-as-you-go model. So when you buy a network edge instance, these are the 4 elements. So you get a virtual machine, effectively, all right? That is pre-tuned to the SKU of that particular vendor. So in the case of, for example, a Cisco would actually go up to a 10 gig SKU. Okay, you could get a 10 gig router as a software. So what we've done, we've enabled that as a service. In the case of Juniper, the popular SKU is actually the 4 gig SKU. So we've actually tuned the VNF to the SKUs that is most popular for that particular vendor. So you get a virtual machine that we've actually tuned for. You get a public IP address, and you get 15 megs of bandwidth with that public IP address. The reason why we did this is to allow you to have out-of-band management. So you could actually come in through the internet, SSH into the box. You could configure these yourself. This is the reason why we actually add this. It has a 10 gig connection to our ECX Fabric virtual port. So these are available when you spin up and you get this network edge instance. All right, so that's really the complete package. And then if you need more, for example, you could actually add additional local connection or remote connections. On top of it, you could get additional internet bandwidth if you want to. So that kind of makes up the total solution. All right, so here are the product pages, the user guide, and the deployment guide. So I have about 2 minutes left here, and I'm conscious of the time. So I want to just close on that and see if there's any question. Dan.
Anybody else have a question first before I ask a question? So I'm curious about your VNFs, your licensing, your onboarding. You've got the routing VNF and the firewall VNF. Are there other choices?
So right now it's the routing and the firewalls. So primarily it's a layer 2 VNF that we've enabled so far. We haven't gone up the stack to layer 3 as yet. So layer 3 will be coming shortly, but we have not enabled that yet.
And are these from your creation, or they come from these equipment vendors?
So it's not our VNFs, it's these equipment vendors' VNFs. So we just license them, and we've actually worked out the licensing mechanism to allow, number one, to allow Equinix to actually have it as a bring your own license. So you take your license, you put it on our portal, and you run it in our infrastructure.
I mean, that's often a pain point, is the licensing.
Absolutely.
So looks like you make it easy to get a license if you don't have one directly through you.
Correct.
And you've obviously taken the time to onboard these VNFs appropriately and get them installed, which is
You're
another pain point for others. Now, these are the most popular VNFs, I take it, especially in your layer 2 environment. What do you anticipate the need being for growing that pool of available VNFs, or can I bring my own VNF?
So that's a great question. So we have actually thought about that. So unfortunately today, if you look at Equinix, we're still very much a colo provider. So we don't have really a sandpit where you can actually do self-onboarding. We are working towards that. That may come probably, I would say, second half of next year.
But there's a market demand for that.
Oh, absolutely. We have a long list then of probably about 200 some vendors.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions? Well, thank you, Tom.
All right. You're welcome. Thank you.